G'day, I'm Ollie Lalive and welcome to GRDC in Conversation. For the last few years, we've travelled Australia's grain growing regions, spending time around kitchen tables, in sheds and workshops, and having my eyes open to the incredible people who live and breathe the Australian grain sector. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional lands and people on which this podcast has been recorded and produced, paying our respects to First Nations Australians and using the ancient practice of storytelling to pass on knowledge, share perspectives and learnings as to what has shaped the sector and is shaping our future. This series is a GRDC investment and takes you behind the scenes with a whole range of people, uncovering their stories, hearing about their passions, and highlighting the projects that are part of their everyday. Our journey and this series continues as we put a spotlight on the next gen, and I can't wait for you to meet them. Today's guest is James Walter, bioinformatics lead at Australian Grain Technologies, where he works alongside plant breeders to turn huge volumes of genetic and field data into better decisions and eventually better varieties. If you've ever wondered how we can have brutal seasons and still see crops remain surprisingly resilient, this conversation goes behind the scenes of the breeding pipeline. We unpack what it takes to take an idea from a cross in the glasshouse through years of field testing, quality checks and seed scale-up, and why stability matters as much as upside, and why data is now one of the biggest levers in modern plant breeding. We're also talking about careers because James is proof there are roles in agriculture most people never even realise exist. James Walter, mate, it's great to sit down with you. I'm going to say, when I look at your role on paper, I think a lot of it's probably going to go over my head, but I'm so interested to hear about the journey you've taken from study and quite a bit of it to obviously an in-depth researcher today with AGT. But I would love to know, if we bumped into each other at the coffee shop just on the corner, how would you describe to me what your role is and what you do day to day?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I guess I would describe my role as kind of a mix between statistics, computer science and biology. So I work alongside our plant breeders at AGT. So they're the people trying to produce new varieties for farmers to grow and push yield forward and other important traits. And so I work with them on all of their genomics data. So looking at the DNA of the plants and trying to work out what are going to be good combinations, what have got good traits, what have got bad traits, storing all of that, analysing it for them, and then combining that with all of the phenotypic data that we collect. So that's all the things that get measured out in the field. So yield, disease, other agronomic traits, analysing those, using them in conjunction with the genomics data, and basically trying to provide data for the breeders to make informed decisions within their programs and hopefully keep them pushing forward.
And so is this something that has been like a passion for science and research and insights that you've had for as long as you can remember? Or how did you end up in this field?
Yeah, so I went to agricultural high school here in Adelaide, and it was there that I sort of really got into agriculture. I'm originally off a small farm in the Adelaide Hills. We ran beef cattle, but I was never that interested in going into anything to do with animals or animal science-based stuff. I thought it's probably something science-based, and then as I was going through high school, I discovered plant science and really got into that. So then following that, I ended up doing a Bachelor of Agricultural Science at the University of Adelaide. Really enjoyed that. But I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. There were parts of the course I loved, parts of the course I didn't like so much. I was sort of trying to decide what I wanted to do going forward after that. At that point, based on what I was doing, I was thinking, I really like genetics. I think I want to work in some kind of lab, like a molecular biology lab, and do genetics-based things. So after my undergrad, I started an honours degree doing that, working in a molecular biology lab. But within a few weeks, I sort of found out the lab was not where I wanted to be. So it was a bit of a shock and confrontation for me, because I spent the last sort of couple of years thinking, this is my path, this is what I'm going to do. Sort of, I know where I want to go to, and then just found out, no, I don't like that at all. So from there, I looked around to try and find another honours degree, ended up doing something sort of more, I would say more practical, sort of more plant and field based, less lab work, more actual work with plants. Ended up working in plant physiology and nutrition for that honours year. And I loved that. Like, I just got so much out of that year and sort of seeing how research comes together and, you know, how we find out these new things about plants and growing plants and what we want to, like what we can research to try and improve agriculture in general. So I loved doing that. But again, after that, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I was thinking like maybe I want to go into academia or further research. But it got suggested to me that I apply for an internship at SARDI, which is the South Australian Research and Development Institute. So SA Government Research in Ag. And I applied for an internship there where they moved me around a few of their teams, particularly the plant pathology teams for a year. And as I was working through that, that just sort of really widened my appreciation of the ag research space and what's happening in the industry. Like, I just saw so many things that I didn't get to see at uni and realized that agriculture was a much bigger sort of industry and space than I had thought. So I guess between my honours degree and that is where I really got the taste of research and sort of wanting to do that. And then following that year at SARDI, I still thought I wanted to do research. So the next step I thought would be good for me to do would go on to do a PhD and dive further into that research space and, you know, spend some more time trying to work out what I wanted to do. And that was when I managed to get in contact with some of the guys at AGT. And they had a project coming up looking at sort of remote sensing of their field trials and measuring crops using different types of sensors and working out how we can use those in the breeding programs. And as I was going through SARDI, this was sort of the time people getting really excited about drones and imagery and, you know, what you could do with all of these things. And I just thought, wow, this would be a great opportunity. I love tech stuff. I love agriculture. What a great way to combine them.
And I just want to take a step back because it seems like someone with your background and what you're working in and around genetics, insight data collection, like I can imagine there's people working on curing cancer and human diseases. What is it about agriculture and specifically the grain sector that's pulled you in?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I just love plants in general. Like, I like working with plants. And even though I don't, you know, really do too much field work with plants, I know that that's the big picture of what I'm working with. The other thing I like is, you know, not to say you can't see these with other industries as well, but I love seeing the impact of what I do. And, you know, even though I'm a few steps back in the process now, like things that I've worked on are now out there with growers. And that's really exciting. Like, you're seeing something you've produced go out into rural communities. It's helping other people with their lives. Like, they're making profit off these things that I've helped be a part of. And, you know, I think it's, I don't know, I guess, I don't know if wholesome is the right word, but it's like it's a very sort of rewarding thing knowing that you're putting things out into the world that are helping other people. I guess that's one of the main things I love about it.
You say you love plants.
Yeah.
Talk to me. Describe that for me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just I love working with plants in general. It's like I said before, I was off a small cattle farm growing up. And like, I love animals as well, but I don't love working with animals. Like, animals can kick you. You can get hurt by them. They're a lot harder to work with. They move around. They don't stay in the same spot. Plants are pretty forgiving to work with. You know, they're not generally going to harm you. They're not going to kick you or move around. So they're easy to work with. They produce great quality products that we use to eat and drink. Not the ones that the ones that I work with still look nice, but, you know, you have your house plants, they also look nice. Yeah, I just think it, like, just working with plants in general, I really enjoy. And I don't know, I just like being about them.
Well, I reckon there's probably a fair few grain growers who align with you with that. One thing that's come up, and I don't know if it's just the topic of conversation, but over over the last 6 months or so, we know how challenging seasonal conditions have been in through southern Australia, and I know New South Wales is feeling the pinch again. But we don't have to go back too far. 2018, 19 were some of the most challenging years for growers. What's changed, like in the physiology, in terms of how we farm and what happens, to see that, yeah, we've chatted to people here in South Australia who have had the worst rainfall years on record, but not their worst crops.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can mostly talk about it from the breeding side of things, but I think from my perspective, it's just many, many years of work and research going into the new varieties that are coming out. Obviously, plant breeding has been going on for a really long time, but it's sort of over the last 20, 30 years, there's been massive step changes in technology that have gone into breeding, and it's meant that we've just been able to push the breeding space even further. So there's just huge amounts of research and investment that go into it now, and technologies that just didn't exist all those years ago, letting us, try and make those better varieties and, screen larger numbers of plants, use things like genetics to do early stages of selection, so you can have really massive populations and cut them down really harsh, so you've only got the best things going out to the field. And it's just using all of those technologies in general, it's just many, many years of testing. And, as the environment's changing over time, we're testing those new genotypes in those environments. We're looking at sort of 8 to 10 years for something to come out to growers from the breeding process. So you've got lots of years of field testing in there. And if you're having some of those hard years in that, you're selecting for things that are going to do well in those hard years.
Is there ways that, and so I guess my context that I look at this within is in Australia, let's say growing season, you can probably tell me the correct answer, 200 and something days, thereabouts. When I worked in Canada, we had like 100-day growing season for cereals. It was insane. But with the rate of technology, is there a way to speed up what happens across a season, or do you have to kind of just, given the environment and...
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of it really is driven by the environment. A lot of, in Australia, a lot of it is photoperiod driven. And then you also have things like vernalization that play into it. So that's the amount, like having a cold snap before the plant will go into a reproductive stage. So look, there are things you can do, and there's a big range in the maturities of plants. So you can have plants that mature quicker, but it means you're trying to cram that development into a shorter period of the year, and you've got to make sure that period of the year is going to be beneficial to that plant. I know there has been work in the past on things like having a 100-day wheat in Australia that's going to go from sowing to producing its grain in those 100 days. But even if you're using a tool like that, you've got to make sure that the environment you're going into is going to be suited for it. A lot of what we do in plant breeding is trying to match new genotypes coming through to the types of environments we want to grow them in. So what we call target environments, because you want to make sure that whatever you're producing is going to do well in that set of target environments. You don't want to breed something for northern New South Wales and then try and push that across to WA, because they're completely different environments and they're probably not going to grow very well. You want to be making sure that you're focusing on where you want the thing to be grown, and that's where you're doing the testing and making sure that it's going to do well in those regions.
Is your job, I'm going to just simplify it, getting harder or easier in the sense of creating these environments in the constraints of what we're seeing in a changing environment, et cetera? Is it getting easier or harder?
I don't know if it's really changing all that much, to be honest. Like I was saying, it's a pretty long process already that we test these things over. So as the environment changes, how we're we're testing over that changing environment as it goes. So, we're not seeing at the moment, I guess, within our business, these massive sudden changes that are playing havoc with us. They're more sort of gradual things over the years. And as that happens, we're out there testing these varieties or these new up and coming varieties in those environments. The environments are changing a bit. But the way that we're testing is not really changing. We're doing the same thing we've been doing before, making sure we get them tested as much as in those environments as we can over as many years as we can before we make any decisions about what to do with them.
And so from the breeding perspective, how do you guys approach it to make sure that there's the varieties that they are becoming hardier, but then also on the flip side, when those good years come, like what we've seen kind of through northern New South Wales, southern Queensland over the last few years, and even WA, like when it's good, how do you just allow these varieties just to go hell for leather?
Yeah, well, it is a bit of a challenge because you got trade-offs with how you're working with that. So, there's lots of different ways that adapted genetics can express themselves. So you can have things that, for example, do just really well in a harsh environment or really well in a soft environment, or something that sort of rides in between and can sort of, depending on what the environment is, it does pretty well across all of them. But things like that, where they do well across everything, you don't normally have those as being the truly elite things when you have one of those softer years. So in terms of the breeding program, a lot of the time what we're after is those things that can sort of withstand all the different environments, because you don't want to end up in a situation where, you plant something regardless of if it's a good year or bad year, but if it's not suited to the variety that you're growing, like it can go either way. You want something that's going to be able to perform across all of them. So largely we're looking for sort of a broad scale adaptation. Not to say that there aren't things out there that work particularly well in some sets of environments, but I think most of our focus is probably on the broader scale things rather than specific adapted varieties.
Not looking for the magic trait as such.
No, not generally. It's more about what the package is, to make sure that variety is going to perform well under most circumstances, because that'll be what gets the grower the best result for them most of the time.
You mentioned before that it can take 8 to 10 years. So can you help me understand like what goes on in that process at those different stages, and help me understand some of the roles where you fit in?
Yeah, sure.
Et cetera.
So I guess for us, it all starts off in a glasshouse. So our breeders are making decisions on what genetics they want from, I guess, like you've got all the varieties that are out there. We've got lots of breeding lines that never quite make it to become a variety because they've got one or two things that aren't quite up to scratch. So you've got this big pool of genetics, and our breeders are deciding from that pool, what are the things we're going to cross together to try and make new combinations that are going to do better than what we've currently got. So there's be things for, trying to have more yield, trying to have better disease resistance, making sure that it's still suitable for all the end use products that we want to create from it. So make these crosses in the glasshouse. So I've got a glasshouse team that do all of that work, manage all the plants there, do the crossing for us, produce all the seed. And then from there, you end up going out into the field for a few seasons of early generation testing. So here we've got the breeders working through, looking at the plants as they're growing, trying to make decisions on any they don't think look quite right. Maybe they're not quite the right plant type. Maybe they're seeing disease coming in it and they want to get rid of it. And so then alongside that, we've got a field team that's managing all of those trials, making sure everything gets loaded, sown, managed, harvested, making sure that we've got seed going forward. And then from that step, we move on to sort of advanced, we call it advanced generation testing. So this is where we're getting closer to the end of the process and we're starting to look at more traits for these plants. We're starting to measure yield. We're starting to cut down the numbers from what was a really big population in the beginning to eventually hoping to get to sort of one thing that might be suitable to release. And sort of as we're going through those early generation and advanced generation testings, I guess that's largely where my team is working at the moment. So as we're working through these things, we're taking samples of these up and coming breeding lines. We're testing the DNA of those to look at, what is a representation of the DNA of this thing, and then using statistical models to then predict what the performance of these lines might be. So, once we've produced some grain, we can we can run a model and predict how is that going to perform for the different traits we're interested in. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to tell you what is the ultimate best thing. It'll tell you what the bad ones are so that you can get rid of those and not bother testing them in the field. So we're working through that, working through processing this DNA data, running the models to be able to give these values back to the breeders. And then once they're collecting data on the traits that they're interested in, then we're helping them analyze that as well, making sure that they're using high quality data, that we're using appropriate statistical models to analyze it and make sure that they're looking at it in a suitable way and that they're going to be able to get the most out of that data. As it's going through that sort of advanced stage field trial point, we also start looking at end product quality. So, in the example of wheat, is it going to make good bread? Is it going to make good noodles? Barley, is it going to make good beer? So we're starting to look at all of that. We've got a quality lab that works through all of that. Lots and lots of really in-depth testing to test these end quality traits. And then again, my team's involved with analyzing all of that data and passing that back to the breeders to make sure they're getting good quality stuff to make decisions with. And then we've also got a variety support team that are working to basically produce commercial quantities of seed that we can then pass off to seed affiliates who will produce it and then sell it on to farmers. And they're also working through the variety support team. They're working through, how we're going to let people know what's good about this new variety that we're thinking of releasing, what's good compared to other things, where does it not line up so much, and sort of getting that information out there for people. So there's a lot of teams involved throughout the process. Yes, myself and my team sort of work across many of those stages on a lot of the data side of it, but we do get to see a lot of the process as it goes through.
It's so incredibly complex. And I just often think of, it's this world that growers don't see. And I think it's this piece of what's so fascinating about the supply chain from pre-farm gate right through to you've outlined there as well, like what's going into the beer, what's going into the quality of wheat that noodles need, etc. But if you could have growers with you for just 1 week or one stage of this, what would be one part of this process that you just wish more growers would get to see from your perspective?
Well, that is a great question. I think probably the bit that has the bit that would have the most impact and sort of the most impressive to show people is just the scale of testing that happens. I'm based here in South Australia out at Roseworthy, but we have breeding centres in the west, at Northam in WA, and northern and southern New South Wales in Narrabri and Wagga Wagga. And so we're running field testing for these varieties across all of Australia based from those breeding centres. And just the amount of effort that the field teams go to get all of those plots sown in the ground and all of these trials sown so that we can collect data and analyse it for the breeders is enormous. Just the effort of sending them to so many sites, running so many plots, sowing them all, managing them all, harvesting them all, and then bringing all the samples back so that we can look at physical grain quality and do product testing on them. It's just such a massive effort. I think it's really impressive to see. And I think, a lot of people might not realize sort of how wide scale we go with this. I was saying before, this is a many, many year process that we're doing these tests for. It's not like we test them for 1 year and think, oh yeah, that looks good. We're looking at many, many years out in the field to collect this data. It's just such a huge amount of data that goes into it.
And so when you're talking about, I guess, that culling process, are we talking thousands of starters to one ultimate finish? Is that what you guys look for?
Many thousands, yeah.
And you just want one out of that?
Yeah. So if it's a bit different for each of the programs, how they look at it. But, if you get one elite thing out of that you could release, that's great. But the other benefits as you go along is, you might have a few things that are pretty good, but maybe they've got maybe they're missing important disease resistance, but they're great for everything else. It's like, well, you might not have got a variety out of it, but you now have the start of the next variety because you can use that to cross with, and that becomes your starting base for your next round. So even if you're not getting something out there all the time, you're always bringing stuff back into the program and cycling it through. So you're always making things better as you go.
And how much is, obviously, the ability to collect data is huge and kind of never ending. The stuff that you're analysing, is it the same as it's kind of has been for quite some time? Is it changing?
Yeah. So I guess it is changing, and there's getting a lot more of it as we go. Like the genetic space has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And the types of things we're analysing now didn't exist 20 years ago. So like it is changing, and those genetic technologies keep on improving and getting better. So the types of data we have access to is changing. And you're also sort of always on the frontier of trying to look at what new technologies are coming out and saying, well, how are we going to take advantage of this? How are we going to use it? And you don't always know when a new technology is coming through where it's going to be suitable. It might take a few years to figure that out. We have new technologies coming through all the time that we try and integrate and test out and look to see how we might use that going forward in the programs. So the data is changing, but probably the main thing that I see in my role is just the amount of data is the thing that's changing most. Like where we were 10 years ago working on this stuff, sort of just starting out, the scale of the data is just completely different. And now it's enormous. Like that's one of the really big challenges in my role is just there's so much data to analyze. How do you store it all? How do you make sure you can access it all? And then how do you analyze all of it is another question entirely.
And so how do you?
So, my team and I spend a lot of time and effort trying to build these systems internally so that we can access everything that we want, and it's in suitable formats so that when people are wanting to access it or when we want to access it, it's there and available. We know how it was produced. We know if something's gone wrong with the processing. Trying to sort of keep a really good catalog of it, I guess. And yeah, for the analyzing of it, lots and lots of lines of code. So we write a lot of code and run a lot of code. And that's one of the things that does also change quite rapidly is updating the way that we look at data and how we analyze it and trying to do that better. So we're always trying to push that forward. Like we want to be able to use the best statistical models we can with the trade-off of making sure that we're still able to actually produce results for the breeders. There's always going to be something better than what we're doing, but getting that extra step might mean that the results are a week later, say. And if they're a week later, well, that means there's a flow-on effect to everything else in the program. Now everything's a week later and someone else is under the pump because they didn't get the results on time to go through the next steps. So you have a trade-off of doing the best that you can within a reasonable time frame and making sure it's still practical to deliver for the business.
I probably want to turn it back on you a little bit and talk a bit about careers in a second. But yeah, I guess I would love to understand from your perspective. Like you talked about like chasing the academia path, going down doing PhD, the interest in robotics and sensors, etc. What is it that has ultimately then landed you where you are?
Yeah. So during my PhD, like I loved working with all the tech stuff. Like that was great. I really enjoyed it. And as I was wrapping up the PhD, AGT were looking for a breeding research scientist was what we called the role at the time. And so that was someone to basically step into a research role and try and look at new technologies coming through, whether they be like physical technologies or new genetic technologies, or new plant material that we could access and try and work out how do we sort of bridge the gap between research, like sort of more academic research and then the applied industry research that we do. How do we bring those forward into the company and make sure that we're sort of pushing the boundaries of technology and making sure we're staying up to date. So I worked in that role for a few years across lots of different projects. But one of the things that sort of kept popping up were a lot of these database projects on, how do we analyze the data we're working with? This sort of at the time, I mean, AI is still obviously a really big thing now, but this was sort of the start of it within agriculture. People were getting really excited about, how we're going to use AI to revolutionize what we're doing. So we had a lot of projects based around, well, how do we analyze what we're doing now, but using AI instead of our current models? So after working on a number of projects like that, I sort of got more familiar with that data space. So the main area that is in is called genomic selection. So that's where we're using the DNA of the plants to try and predict how they're going to perform. So as I was doing more work with that, just AGT's internal work in that space was increasing and we needed more resources on it. And so a position opened up to lead the team that's working on it. And I said, yeah, I'd be keen to give that a go. So that's sort of how I stepped into my current role. But it is very different to where I started and sort of not where I thought I was going to end up. But I'm very grateful that I did. Like I love doing this job.
Going from being, and I presume you're still very much hands-on, but then also having the added complexity of managing teams and motivating people in what is complex, time-bound, lots of deadlines, etc.
Yeah.
How have you going from being like the expert in the doing to actually then going, well, yeah, my most important job now is about empowering the others.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's a bit of a struggle. Like I'm a very technical based person. Like you said, I love doing the technical stuff, and that's where I started. And I still do a lot of technical stuff, but it's a change in mindset of, the technical stuff isn't all on me. It's about building up the team so that they can do the technical stuff, and I'm there to help build them. So that's sort of what I'm trying to focus on at the moment, like making sure that they're doing the best that they can. They're building themselves up so that they can do that work, and then making sure that, what we're working on is still relevant to all of the breeders and the rest of the company, making sure that we're still delivering those results in time for everyone and that they're getting something that they can use. So it has been quite a mind shift and certainly still one that I'm working on, but it has been good.
One thing I was wondering before, and I think it's kind of the perfect time to bring it up, is like not letting perfect be the enemy of good. And so, yeah, how do you balance that, and how do you balance that within your team and the broader business of going, well, actually, we need to continue to progress because we've got another growing season around the corner, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you balance that?
So that's one I find really challenging. So I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I'm definitely getting better at it, but I'm still not perfect at it yet. Doing that balance of when is something good enough and it's done. I think this is something that people that do PhDs also struggle with a bit. You're working on this really massive project. You're writing up your thesis. You want it to be perfect. Like you want all your work to be as good as it can be, but you can get stuck in that rut and never finish it because the sad reality is it will never be perfect. There's always something more you can do. And definitely within industry, it's, finding that balance of when is it good enough and it's time to stop it. Like you have to find a point where you've got the most out of the work that you can for the amount of effort that you're putting in, and realizing that if I put in more effort, we're actually not really going to see much of a return on it. And it is really challenging. And it's something that I and my team struggle with a bit as we're working through a lot of sort of our improvement projects is, how do we draw the line on this is now good enough to start using versus, I think it's almost there, but we need a bit more work before we start doing it. I think probably one of the things I find is it's almost always ready well before you think it is. So you may as well just start using it and start trying to get the benefits of it. And if it's not quite ready when you start using it, by the time you finish that first testing of it, it's going to be ready because you'll have to have made it do what you needed it to do. And so then you've got it to your minimum viable product, I guess you call it, of you've reached that point of it's now good enough. And, maybe we spend the next 6 months or year tweaking it, improving it. We've got 80% of the work done now and it's delivering results.
And so what role of mentors and people, whether it's been inside the business or outside at university, et cetera, how have they helped you build that skill set and I guess, develop your own need to go, yep, actually let's just get it done?
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty fortunate with the people I work with, and sort of basically everyone in the company is willing to spend time with you to discuss what you're doing, making sure that what you're working on is suitable for what you're trying to do, sort of giving you ideas, just bouncing ideas around, and then so as part of my PhD, some of my supervisors from AGT. And so one of my supervisors is now the CEO there. And, he's always been there to sort of push me along and encourage me to, try and strive for that next best thing. And I've definitely really appreciated that. It's always been there to push me out of my comfort zone to make sure I'm not getting too comfortable in my work. And yeah, just the people I've worked with and the supervisors I've had over the years, particularly within the business, have just been great and like really pushed me for that sort of self-development, professional development, trying to build me up so that I can get to the next step in my career and make sure I'm, delivering more valuable impact for the company and for growers.
They're keeping you honest.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, if you were talking back to graduates or PhD students, people who are kind of coming through, what would you love to have known back when you were at that stage that you do know now?
I think the main thing for me would just be like agriculture is such a big space. Like it's more than what you think it is. Like the role that I do now, I had no idea such a thing would exist. Like even the stuff I did in my PhD, when I was going through uni, it didn't even cross my mind that was a thing. Like, I think people often think of agriculture as just farming, but it's not. There's so many things that go into it. And there's so many other different industries that feed into it. And, you can do all of these sort of cross-industry jobs now. Roles that are combining multiple different things that you wouldn't normally think of. So, like I said before, sort of at the start, my job is a lot of statistics, computer science, biology. Like I did an ag degree. I didn't really do statistics. I didn't do computer science, but those are things I've learned along the way that are really important in what we're doing. There's just so many possibilities out there in ag. Like food science is another great one. Like as you're going through an ag degree, you don't often think of food science as being like a really key thing, but everything we do in breeding new varieties, if they don't make good food, well, it was a bit of a waste of time. Like no one's going to grow them if you can't deliver them to make food with. So yeah, there's just so many opportunities out there.
So many complexities and so many niches that people can obviously build.
Yeah, and I think like just trying to get as much experience as you can and go and see different things, get out there, try different things that you're not sure about. Don't just think that agriculture is one thing. Like try and experience as much as you can to work out what it is that you're interested in.
I love it. If we look 5 to 10 years timeframe from now, what is an area that you think this is an area that I really want to continue learning about, get more involved in? Yeah, where do you see yourself kind of focusing?
I think the thing I'm excited about for me and my team is looking at, as new genetic technologies come on board, how do we start using that data? Like, we feel like we work with really big data sets now, and that's not to say we don't, but they could be so much bigger than what we're currently working with. How are we going to handle all of that? Like it's a whole nother level of storage, a whole nother level of infrastructure around that data. But then also the analytical techniques, like how are we going to make sure that we're staying up to date with how we analyze and process all of this data, making sure that, we're trying to do the best that we can with it. And I mean, I'm sure there's going to be new technology solutions that don't exist now that will to help us do all of that. I think that's really exciting to see how all of that's going to come on board.
Absolutely. Now, mate, one question I want to finish on, and I would say it's definitely been a theme from this current series, which is really the next gen, has been maybe a little bit of reluctance or hesitancy for people to come on and talk about what they're doing. We're at the end of, say, a 40-ish minute podcast. How beneficial has probably, say, the last 40 minutes been for you, but also too, why is it really important that especially the next gen jump at these opportunities, whether it's on social media, part of ground cover, whatever it might be, to share a bit of their perspectives, work and story.
I think like one of the things I really appreciated sort of going through uni and earlier in my career is like seeing what other people were doing and knowing what's out there in the industry, and experiences like this are a way of doing that. Like, you know, one of the things I would have loved through uni is to have someone tell me like, oh, here are all the different things you could do in ag, like showing me the type of work I do now. That would have been fantastic. So sort of getting that message out there is really good. The other thing I think is good for sort of emerging people in the industry is, you know, making sure you don't end up in that comfort zone. Like, I don't like going outside of my comfort zone. I'd very much like to stay in it, but I'm constantly trying to push myself to go out of it because it's, you know, it's part of your professional development. You never quite know where it's going to take you. You know, maybe someone will listen to this and like it'll really click with them and they'll be thinking about ag in a different way, or they'll be thinking about plant breeding and they've never thought about it before. Like, I think that's sort of the exciting part of it, is that you can reach people that traditionally don't understand the types of work that you're doing. And maybe that's the thing they want to do and they just don't know it yet.
Absolutely. Well, mate, thank you so much for sitting down with us and having a chat for GRDC in Conversation.
No, thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's it for another episode of GRDC in Conversation. I hope you're enjoying coming around Australia just as much as I am, meeting the people who are shaping Australia's grain sector and ensuring that we're able to keep thriving for future generations. If you know someone who you'd love to see us get on the podcast, reach out to the GRDC via their social channels or via your local rep. The next In Conversation episode is back in a fortnight's time, so mark your diaries. We can't wait to see you then.